She said you passed away last month, Mr. Whitaker. I'm sorry if this is awkward. That was the voice of the young man from the bank. His name was Kyle. I remember because his tone wavered like someone realizing they'd stumbled into a ghost story. My name is Richard Whitaker. I'm 74 from Portland, Oregon. And that call was the day I found out my own daughter had told the world I was dead. At first, I thought I'd misheard him. I'm sorry. What did you just say? I asked. He cleared his throat. Your daughter, Ms. Lauren Whitaker, she came in 2 weeks ago with a death certificate. Said she was handling your final affairs. She's been trying to close out your investment accounts. I didn't speak. The silence stretched long enough that he must have thought the line dropped. Mr. Whitaker? He said again, voice careful now. I'm here, I managed. And as you can hear, very much alive. He exhaled sharply. Then, sir, we may have a serious issue. When I hung up, I just sat there in my kitchen, staring at the phone. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I looked around at the walls, the photos, the chair where my late wife, Ellen, used to read in the evenings. Dead. She told them I was dead. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my glasses. My reflection in the kitchen window looked older than I remembered. Maybe because, in that moment, I felt every one of those 74 years pressing down on me. I tried to reason it out. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a clerical error, some bureaucratic nightmare. But deep down, I knew. Lauren had been distant for months. Cold, impatient when I called, always in a hurry. I remembered our last conversation. Dad, you need to think about the future. The house, the accounts. None of this is organized. I'd laughed it off. The future can wait a little, sweetheart. She'd sighed. You always say that. Now the meaning behind those words stung like a slow burn. I went to the cabinet and pulled out an old photo album. The first picture was of her at 5 years old, holding Ellen's hand, smiling with missing teeth. I could still hear Ellen's voice that day. She's going to be our bright one, Richard. Smart, strong, unstoppable. Unstoppable. She'd been right. As the evening light faded, I sat in the living room without turning on a lamp. My mind kept replaying the bank officer's voice. She said you passed away. How do you even begin to grieve being erased by your own child? When I finally stood up, the house creaked like it had been listening. I walked to the hallway, past the photographs of birthdays, graduations, her wedding day. All frozen pieces of a life that apparently ended without me. Somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak, I realized something else. If she'd gone that far, there had to be a reason. Money, control, maybe both. But whatever it was, she'd forgotten one thing. You can't bury a man who still has a pulse and a name. And that name was about to complicate her perfect lie. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark with the phone still on the table, replaying that conversation over and over until the words lost their shape. Your daughter said you passed away. It didn't sound real. How do you process something like that? The next morning, I went for a walk through the neighborhood. The same route Ellen and I used to take after dinner. The maple trees were shedding early that year, and every gust sent a scatter of red leaves across the sidewalks. I watched them move and thought how easily the world replaces what falls. Maybe that's what Lauren thought too. When I got back home, I made coffee and sat by the window. Across the street, my neighbor, Mrs. Nolan, waved. She looked surprised, more than usual. She hesitated before waving back, almost like she was seeing a ghost. Later, I found out why. Around noon, she came by with a casserole. Her face was pale when I opened the door. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Richard? I didn't think—" I frowned. "Didn't think what?" She held the dish tighter. "Lauren told me. You passed away last month. We all signed a card. I'm so sorry." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The weight of her words pressed the air out of my chest. "She told everyone?" I asked quietly. Mrs. Nolan nodded, embarrassed. "She said it was sudden. A stroke, I think. There was even a small memorial gathering at her house." I thanked her and closed the door before she could say more. The casserole sat on the counter, untouched. That was the moment it sank in. This wasn't just about money or paperwork. My daughter had buried me in the minds of everyone I'd ever known. She'd written my ending and handed it out like it was truth. I went to my office, the small room where I used to keep our family paperwork. The smell of old paper and dust hung heavy. On the desk sat a framed photo. Ellen holding baby Lauren in the garden, both of them laughing. I stared at it until the image blurred. Ellen would have known how to reach her. She always could. Me, I only knew how to provide. I turned on the computer, more out of habit than reason, and opened the internet. It didn't take long to find Lauren's social media page. There it was, a post dated 3 weeks ago. "Rest in peace, Dad. You taught me everything, and I'll carry you forever." Hundreds of comments, condolences, prayers, people calling me a good man. And beneath it all, a picture. Me, sitting in a hospital bed from last year when I'd had pneumonia. She'd taken it when she visited, said she wanted to document progress. Now it was proof of my death. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling slightly. The irony wasn't lost on me. My daughter hadn't even needed to lie very well, just long enough for the world to believe her. I turned off the computer and leaned back in the chair. The house was silent except for the sound of the old clock ticking. Slow, steady, cruelly alive. For the first time in years, I spoke to Ellen out loud. Did we raise her wrong, love? Or did the world just teach her faster than we did? The room didn't answer. But the silence felt heavier than grief. It felt like truth. The next morning, I went to the bank. The one downtown where Ellen and I used to keep our joint savings. The manager, a polite woman named Nancy, looked startled when she saw me walk through the door. "Mr. Whitaker," she said softly, like saying my name might break some rule. "We weren't expecting you." I gave a small smile. Most people don't expect the dead to show up for appointments. Her cheeks flushed. "I'm so sorry, sir. I only handled what your daughter brought us. We received official documents, your death certificate, a notarized letter giving her power of attorney." I nodded, forcing my voice to stay calm. "May I see them?" She hesitated. "Technically, they're under review now that you've confirmed you're alive. But yes, give me a moment." When she returned, she handed me a thin folder. Inside were copies of papers that made my stomach twist. My name, my address, even my signature. Though it wasn't mine. The death certificate listed my date of passing as the same week I'd been in the hospital last year. She'd used my illness as her story. My fake signature appeared beneath a note stating I'd wished for my estate to pass entirely to my daughter, Lauren. I traced the ink with my thumb, studying every stroke. It was close, frighteningly close. The loop on the R was smaller, and the tail of the K didn't curl the way mine did, but otherwise, it was nearly perfect. Nancy said quietly, "Your daughter mentioned you had no other relatives. We only verified against what was on file. It's all right, I said, even though it wasn't. You couldn't have known. She looked up. We've already frozen all transactions pending investigation. I assume you'll want to file a report? I thought about it. The image of Lauren as a child flashed in my mind. The little girl who used to sit on Ellen's lap, tracing hearts on birthday cards. I could almost hear her giggle when she'd call me Daddy Rich, because I used to give her $1 coins as treasure. I shook my head slowly. Not yet. I just needed to see the truth. When I left the bank, the city felt louder than usual. Car horns, footsteps, chatter, life moving on, uncaring. I walked down to the waterfront, where Ellen and I used to eat ice cream on Sundays. The benches were empty now, except for a single gull picking at crumbs. I sat there a long time, trying to decide which hurt worse. That she'd stolen from me, or that she'd buried me to do it. By the time I got home, the sky had turned gray. I placed the folder on my desk, next to Ellen's framed photo. Her smile still had the same quiet faith it always did. I know, I whispered to her. You'd tell me to forgive. But how do you forgive someone who's written your obituary while you're still breathing? The house answered only with creaks. As I reached to turn off the lamp, I noticed something strange. A pair of headlights in the driveway. A car I didn't recognize. Through the window, I saw two people stepping out, a man and a woman in suits, carrying clipboards. They looked around the property, pointing at the windows, jotting notes. My chest tightened. Real estate agents. It seemed my daughter had already moved to the next phase of her plan. I watched from behind the curtain as they walked around my yard, their shoes crunching against the gravel where I used to teach Lauren how to ride her bike. The woman in the suit pointed at the porch railing. We'll need to repaint that before listing, she said. The man nodded, jotting something down on his clipboard. Listing. The word hit harder than any insult could have. My daughter wasn't just stealing my accounts. She was selling my home. The place Ellen and I built from the ground up 40 years ago. The one where every corner still whispered her laughter. I stepped outside. Can I help you? Both of them froze. The man blinked, confused. Oh, Mr. Whitaker? Yes, I said. The woman's face drained of color. I'm sorry, sir. We were told. I know what you were told, I interrupted softly. But as you can see, I'm still among the living. They exchanged awkward glances. Your daughter, Ms. Lauren Whitaker, authorized an appraisal, the woman said carefully. She provided all the documents. I took a slow breath. I see. Well, this house isn't for sale. And if she calls, tell her she can stop treating me like a headline. They apologized and left quickly. I stood on the porch long after their car disappeared down the road. The autumn air was cold, sharp, and it carried that familiar smell of rain on cedar, Ellen's favorite. When I went back inside, the house felt different. Not just quieter, emptier. The walls didn't feel like mine anymore. The photographs on the hallway seemed like they belonged to someone else's life. In my study, I opened the bottom drawer of the old oak desk. It was locked, the way I'd left it years ago. Ellen had once told me, "Keep this closed until you truly need it." I never questioned her. Now, standing in a house that my own daughter had tried to erase, I decided maybe it was time. I found the small brass key in my wallet, the same one I'd carried for decades without ever using. The lock turned stiffly, as if it had been waiting all these years. Inside was a single envelope, sealed in faded cream paper with Ellen's handwriting on the front. For Richard, when trust turns to silence. The sight of her handwriting made my throat close. I sat down slowly, holding the envelope in my hands. Ellen had always known how to name moments before they happened. I didn't open it yet. I couldn't. Not tonight. My heart was still too raw. Instead, I placed it on the desk beside the folder of forged documents. One truth born from love, another from betrayal. The contrast was unbearable. I turned off the lamp and sat there in the dark, watching the faint reflection of my face in the window. It struck me that maybe Lauren wasn't the only one who'd forgotten who I was. Maybe I had too. Somewhere between giving everything and expecting nothing back. The clock ticked quietly on the mantel. "Ellen," I whispered, "what did you leave me this time?" The room held its breath. I stared at the envelope on my desk for a long time before opening it. Ellen's handwriting had always been neat, even when her hands began to shake toward the end. Seeing her letters again was like hearing her voice from another room. I broke the seal carefully. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges. I unfolded it and read the first line. "If you're reading this, Richard, it means something has gone wrong, something I feared might, even back when things still felt right." My throat tightened. Ellen never wasted words. "I know how you love her. I do too. But love doesn't always protect. Sometimes it blinds. I set aside something years ago, not for me, not even for her, for you. It's held in your name only, under the trust we built when the business sold. The account can never be touched without your living signature." I paused. My hands were trembling now. "If the day comes when trust turns to silence, when our daughter forgets where she came from, I want you to remember that I saw this coming. I knew she'd be ambitious, and I hoped it would make her strong, not hollow. Don't let her shame harden you. Use what's left to protect your peace, not your pride." At the bottom, she'd written a single sentence, one she used to whisper when life felt too heavy. "When everything breaks, love quietly rearranges itself." I set the letter down, blinking hard. Behind it was a smaller envelope marked "Trust Documentation." I opened it slowly. Inside was a copy of a deed. The small house Ellen and I bought years ago near the coast. I'd almost forgotten it existed. But more than that, there was mention of an account in my name. One Lauren couldn't access. It clicked then. That's why the bank had called about my signature. Ellen's foresight had stopped the lie before it could finish. I leaned back in the chair, my pulse steadying. Ellen had always been gentle, but she was never naive. She'd left me armor disguised as love. For a long while, I didn't move. The house creaked softly around me, the way it always did at night. But instead of emptiness, I felt a strange calm. Lauren had written me out of her life, but Ellen had written me back. And I took a deep breath and looked at the stack of papers on my desk, her letter, the trust, the forged documents Lauren had made. One built from care, the other from greed. I whispered, "You protected me again, didn't you, Ellen?" The room felt warmer somehow, as if her presence still lingered. I decided then that I wouldn't confront Lauren right away. Let her think the story had gone her way. Some truths were better revealed when silence does the talking. The night outside was quiet, except for a soft drizzle against the window. I folded Ellen's letter carefully and placed it back inside the box, next to her photograph. She was still saving me, even now. It was early afternoon when I heard the tires crunch on the gravel outside again. I looked out the window and saw Lauren's car. Dark blue, spotless, the kind she used to mock me for never being able to afford. She got out slowly, sunglasses on, phone in hand, already mid-conversation. "Yeah, I'll handle it," she said, her tone clipped. "The sale's delayed, but I'll get the paperwork sorted." She ended the call and looked toward the house, her expression tightening when she saw me standing in the doorway. "Dad," she said, as if my name were a surprise. "You're up?" "I tend to be most days," I said evenly. She hesitated, forcing a smile. "You look good. I was just in the area." "Appraisers don't come by just in the area," I replied. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Okay, I'll admit, things got complicated. The bank froze everything. Some misunderstanding about your signature." I stepped aside to let her in. Must have been a shock. The dead don't usually sign. She flinched just a little. "Dad, come on. You don't understand. I was trying to protect what's ours." "Ours?" I asked quietly. "That's a generous word for something you tried to take while pretending I was gone." She crossed her arms. "You weren't using it. The house, the money, you were just sitting on it. I thought that I was disposable." Silence stretched between us. She looked everywhere, but at me. I walked to the desk and picked up the wooden box where Ellen's letter now rested. "Your mother left something for you," I said. Her brows furrowed. "Mom?" "Yes. She always knew how to see ahead of us both." I took out a sealed envelope with her name on it and handed it over. "She wanted you to read this when you forgot what love costs." Lauren stared at it like it burned. "What's in it?" "I don't know," I said, though I did. "But I think it might remind you who we were before money started talking louder than blood." She scoffed softly. "You're making this dramatic again, Dad." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but sometimes the truth needs a little weight." She turned the envelope over in her hands, but didn't open it. "I don't have time for this right now. I'll read it later." "That's what your mother always said about happiness," I murmured. "Later." Until one day there wasn't a later. Her jaw tightened. "You don't get to guilt me." "I'm not trying to," I said, my voice calm. "But I won't let you bury me twice." That line hung between us like smoke. She didn't answer. She just turned toward the door, still clutching the envelope. When she opened it, sunlight spilled through the frame, catching her hair the way it used to when she was a child playing in the yard. For a brief second, I saw that little girl again. The one who used to run barefoot to show me the seashells she'd found. Then she was gone. I stood there a while longer, the echo of her car fading down the road. The house settled back into silence, but something inside it had shifted. I looked down at Ellen's photo and whispered, "Your turn, love. Let her hear you." The room stilled, soft and forgiving. A week passed before I heard from the bank again. The call came early in the morning, the kind of hour when the world still feels fragile. "Mr. Whitaker," Nancy said, her voice more confident this time. "We've completed the verification process. The documents your daughter submitted were fraudulent. Your living signature has officially nullified everything she tried to authorize." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you," I said. "There's more," she added. "Her transactions triggered a compliance alert. The authorities are reviewing the matter. Would you like to pursue formal charges?" I looked out the window. The garden Ellen planted was half wild now. Lavender and roses tangled together in a quiet, stubborn bloom. "No," I said after a moment. "Let it rest. Some lessons don't need a courtroom." When I hung up, the house felt lighter. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't angry, just tired. Later that day, I went to the bank in person to finalize the account transfer Ellen had written about. I withdrew part of the trust and moved it quietly into my new account, one Lauren didn't know existed. It wasn't about hiding money. It was about reclaiming dignity. Nancy slid a pen across the desk. "Just sign here," she said. I took my time, pressing the pen carefully to the page. My signature, my real one, curved across the paper, slow and deliberate. Funny thing about a name, it means nothing until someone tries to take it from you. When I left the bank, the sky had turned gray. Clouds heavy but calm. The air smelled like rain. I drove out toward the coast, to the small property Ellen and I bought decades ago, the one she'd written about in her letter. The house there was simple. One story, pale wood siding, the same salt-stained shutters Ellen had painted herself. It hadn't been touched in years, but it stood strong, like it had been waiting for me. I stepped inside, opened the windows, and let the sea air sweep through. This was what Ellen meant by peace, not money, not revenge, just a place where silence wasn't punishment. Before leaving, I sat at the small kitchen table and wrote a letter. My handwriting was slower now, deliberate. "Lauren, by now you know what happened. I didn't press charges. I won't. But you should know this. The world always calls you what you sign your name to. You signed my death once. I signed your forgiveness today. Maybe that's the difference between us." I folded the letter, but I didn't sign it. I left it blank at the bottom, just my name missing. A small absence with its own kind of truth. When I returned home that evening, the phone was blinking with one missed call. Her number. I didn't play the message. I just sat down, let the quiet fill the room, and realized I didn't need to hear her voice to know the ending. Forgiveness doesn't require applause. It only needs to breathe. It's been 2 months since the bank closed the case. The world moved on, as it always does. I moved too, not far, just across town to a small apartment near the river. The kind of place where no one knows your history, where silence feels like permission instead of punishment. Most days, I walk along the water and think about Ellen, about how she somehow saw further ahead than both of us combined. I keep her letter framed on my nightstand now. It reminds me that even after death, love can still guard you from betrayal. Lauren never came by again. She left a few voicemails, quiet, shaky things I still haven't listened to. Sometimes I imagine what she said. Maybe she apologized. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she just wanted to know if I'd really forgiven her. The funny thing is, I have. Not out of mercy, out of exhaustion. There comes a point when anger just weighs too much to carry. I spend my evenings by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. It's peaceful here. No noise, no pretending. Just air and the hum of a world that doesn't owe me anything. But I still think about her. About the little girl who once made me a Father's Day card with too much glue, who kissed my cheek and said, "Don't ever leave me, Daddy." And then, years later, she buried me on paper. Now I sit here alive, wondering what that really means, to be erased and still breathing. Maybe I did the right thing by walking away. Maybe silence was my justice. Or maybe it was cowardice dressed as peace. I don't know anymore. That's why I'm asking you. I gave my daughter everything, my time, my name, my home, my love. You've heard how she treated me, and you know what I still feel for her. Tell me, what should I do now? Should I forgive her and call her again? Should I let her live with the silence she created? Or should I finally teach her that love without respect has a cost? Because no matter what she did, I still love her.